Hey everybody, Teching and Barry back again, and today I got some news for ya. I got some big news for ya. Hell, I got some hot news for ya. Fresh Zoro-based news right off of the presses. Actually, I think this came out like 2 weeks ago or so, maybe longer. So I got some, stale Zoro news that's lukewarm off the presses just for you, all right? But hey, you know what? It's fine because it's been a while since we had any Zoro news, all right? After the last incident that occurred, I think we all remember, it was a few years ago when that GPS company decided to use Zoro as a spokesperson. And then, Zoro came out and did all the commercials for the GPSs and they got put in the cars and oh man, that was a debacle, right? I mean, that was pretty bad. There was a lot of recalls, a lot of people getting lost, few people died. I think the lawsuits are still going on. So you can understand why they've been hesitant to put Zoro back into the spotlight after a while, right? And anyway, no, that never happened. In case anyone's sitting there like, wait, did Zoro actually sponsor a GPS company? No, that was a joke. That didn't actually happen. Although, yeah, that's probably what would have happened if he did, right? Okay. Zoro just being involved would have caused that to go belly up. All right, we got a brand new Zoro light novel that is going to be released, the first chapter of which is going to be serialized in the new edition of the One Piece magazine. It's a special edition called The Wings, and we have Zoro and Sanji prominently displayed on the cover of this new magazine. It's coming out June 4th, so next month, and it's going to be covering their battles and various stuff involving the wings of the Pirate King, because this is what they, called themselves during Wano when they were fighting King and Queen respectively. It was like, Luffy's gonna soar through the skies as the Pirate King. Well, we are the wings that are gonna keep him aloft. I wonder if Zoro and Sanji are going to argue over which one is which wing. Zoro's like, I'm right wing, and Sanji's left wing, and then somebody else is in the background like, hey, quit being political. It's like, oh no, we're not arguing about politics. We're literally just arguing about who's gonna be a metaphorical wing. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, that probably they would argue about that probably, right? So it's the same deal with like Heroines and the Law light novel, where there's chapters that are released in the magazine, and then after like 3 or 4 chapters, there's like a compendium, like an actual book that is sold in stores. Some of them get English releases. I know Heroines is getting an English release at some point. The Ace light novels did as well, but I don't think those started off in the magazine. I think that was its own separate thing. The Law light novel, same deal, was serialized in the magazine, and it's its own thing. And in fact, the same person that wrote the Heroines light novel, Jun Esaka, is the same person that's writing the Zoro light novel. So we're in good hands there. It's also going to have some illustrated elements done by an artist by the name of Nakamaru. So I'm really excited to see where this is going. We know the basic premise. I don't know if it's going to be like the entire novel's premise or just this first installment, but it was listed that it was going to be about Zoro's journey as a bounty hunter before he went to go, he ended up in Shell's Town, and then Luffy found him, on the cross, and then they defeated Morgans together, and he joined, the Straw Hat Crew, became the first member of the Straw Hat Crew, effectively, right? So I would really like, actually, the whole novel to be focused on this. Like, I know with Heroines, they have 2 light novels. There were 8 chapters total, like the first 4 were one book, and then the other 4 were another book. Maybe you could do some other stories with Zoro, like some side stories going on with, like, while he's part of the crew. But I would like to see a few chapters focusing on Zoro just journeying around the East Blue, getting lost, and being a bounty hunter, all right? Because that's an aspect of the story. Bounty hunters in general are kind of used as like they're filler enemies. Like a lot of times in filler episodes or like a movie or an OVA or something, we'll see bounty hunters being utilized, but really beyond that, not too much. There was that one bounty hunter that had the cactus for a head that was at Dressrosa, and he was like, oh man, I've been making a killing rounding up all those impel down jailbirds that escaped. I'm going around rounding them up. So that was a reference to something. A few bounty hunters were in the Corridilla Coliseum for Dressrosa. But beyond that, we don't really focus on them too much. So a couple things about Zoro being a bounty hunter, the things that we know about that's in the canon of the manga. We know, of course, that he was raised in Shimosuke Village. His father was Arashi. His mother was Terra. Terra died of an illness. Arashi died from getting attacked by pirates. I hope we can maybe reference a little bit of that stuff. Like, we don't have to kick off the novel with Zoro already in the thick of it. I mean, there is some interesting lore that was dropped by Zoro in the background of the SBS during Wano. Here's Zoro's family tree. It would be cool to at least reference Arashi and Terra in the light novel a little bit, right? Like, maybe the first chapter could focus a little bit on his, like, the latter half of his training at Shimosuke. Like, it brings up a question. Like, did Zoro's parents die when he was, like, a really little kid? Because we don't don't really see them in the flashback at all. Like, did Arashi get killed when Zoro was like 3 and then his mother died when he was 5 or something like that? It was like it was like when he was that young? Or was it like later on, like after Kuina passed away, maybe Terra died when Zoro was like a teenager or something like that? Because we just don't really focus on Zoro's life in the village. It's mainly that scene with Kozaburo when he's training on the cliffside, and then there's the backstory with Kuina when he's dueling Kuina, and then they have their final duel together, and she begins to cry because she understands that, oh, I'm not going to be as strong as a man, and my own father told me, swordsmen are going to be stronger just because they're men and everything like that. So she gets really depressed, and she's either, I don't know, defeated by the stairs or defeated by a rival sword master, or I don't know exactly. I can't remember that, but something happened, and Kuina either went away hanging her head in shame, or she's dead. One of the two, however you want to interpret that. And then Zoro, of course, goes to Koshiro, who's Kuina's father and the head of the dojo, and was like, I want to avenge her. I want to become the greatest swordsman in the world, to not just for my dream, but for her dream as well. And then Koshiro gives Zoro the Wado Ichimonji in that really epic scene there, okay? That is, I'm pretty sure, all the information we have in the manga that we have given. Koshiro gives Zoro the sword, and then everything else is kind of just, like, inferred as, like, okay, he trains a little bit more in the village. At a certain point, he leaves. He's a bounty hunter, but we don't really see much of that. And then eventually he ends up in Shellstown, and there's the whole backstory there where he's in the bar drinking. Helmeppo brings the wolf in and is acting like a general jackass, and then Zoro, like, kills the wolf, and then they, tie him up, without food and water, and then that's when Kobe and Luffy show up, right? Okay. Now, many of you might be thinking, like, I thought there was a little bit more to Zoro's backstory than that. Well, yes and no. There was, but it was in the anime. But the way that it was shown in the anime is not really that ridiculous or absurd. I mean, the events that occur in the anime aren't anything that make you think like, whoa, this don't make no sense. Well, actually, there is, now that I'm thinking about it, now that the new information from Wano has out, with Zoro getting the swords from Kozaburo and everything, it might lead to a little bit of a, not really a plot hole. Actually, I think I could find a way it fits perfectly. So, in the anime, I think it was stated that when Zoro was 17, he left the village. And there's even a scene where he's, like, in the dojo, and he slices a big boulder, like, right in half with his sword, with the Wado, and he's like, okay, it's time for me to go now. And Koshiro walks out, and he's like, ah, yes, good luck on your journey, Zoro. Make Kuina proud and all that, right? So that's not in the manga or anything like that. I don't think there's anything in the manga that specifically says Zoro left the village at age 17. However, I mean, going along with Luffy and Ace leaving their respective village at 17, maybe that was just the age that most protagonists feel like, I am ready to be a true anime protagonist. It's actually a little older than some other anime protagonists, right? Like Naruto was like 12 when he had his adventure, right? But, Luffy's like, I'm going to train a little bit more. I'm going to wait until I'm 17 and then begin my anime adventure. That's how it works. So Zoro leaving at age 17, he meets Luffy at age 19, so that gives Zoro 2 years to, establish himself as a bounty hunter in the East, collect some heads from, various pirates and bandits and stuff, and cash in a little bit, getting the epithet, Pirate Hunter Zoro. In 2 years, we saw where everything that happened in 2 years in the One Piece world, so I could see that very fitting. Hell, the Straw Hats' journey from Luffy leaving Dawn Island all the way up to them getting separated at Sabaody, that was less than 1 year. So definitely enough stuff could have happened there. Maybe Zoro left when he was a little younger, like 15, 16, but 17, he could have left then and just began his bounty hunter journey, right? So there's also the episode where we find out a lot about Johnny and Yosaku and how they met Zoro originally, right? So Zoro's in that bar, and there's a bandit in the bar. His name is Billy, and he has a bounty of 5 million, which is, honestly, you might laugh at that now, like, Billy, 5 million. Dude, I mean, like, that's around Alvida's bounty. I mean, yeah, for the East Blue, for just a generic bandit, I mean, that's a pretty respectable bounty. And Zoro needs some food. He doesn't really have any money, so he cuts down Billy really quick, and he's like, hey, if I cash in that guy's bounty, you give me some food? And the bartender's like, yeah, but you do know who you just cut down, right? And he's like, well, I don't know. Who was it? I don't know. And he's just like, yeah, that was Billy. He's the little brother from, the camp up the hill, and you all know who runs that place. And Zoro's like, no, I don't really know. He's got a bounty of 10 million. What's his name? Wicked Dick. And then everybody goes quiet in the tavern. You could hear a pin drop at the mention of Wicked Dick. There is an opportunity for Wicked Dick to maybe appear in this light novel thing. You know what has to happen, right? Zoro needs to fight Wicked Dick again. We need a whole chapter where Zoro fights Wicked Dick. I love that. I love that. Favorite, best One Piece character, easily. And then in the anime episode, like, they had to do this on purpose. It was golden. It was great. At the end of the episode, Zoro's fighting Dick, right? Okay, and Dick's got this giant cannon. It's got lots of girth to it. And he's hoisting up this giant cannon, and he's just like, yeah, I'm Wicked Dick. Check out my cannon. And then Zoro literally, there's a shot in the episode. You go frame by frame if you want. It's a great shot where Zoro, grabs his swords, and he goes like, onigiri, three-sword style. But Dick is huge, right? He's a giant guy. He's like a mammoth. He's a mountain whale kind of figure. I think that was his other epithet, but like, come on, mountain whale, Wicked Dick. You already have the name. The name is good, okay? So anyway, Zoro just speeds under Dick and just swoosh and just cuts him. And you don't see anything, but like you can look at that scene and be like, oh God. He went like right under his legs and shoo, onigiri, and then Dick's like, no, my dick. And he just falls down. Oh, that was a episode. Fantastic. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so, anyway, that was the only real major exploit we've ever seen Zoro as a bounty hunter, which I admit, that's all we had up until now. That's all we needed up until now, all right? Because that's a great story. There's also a side plot in that episode where Zoro's katanas keep breaking. Like, he goes to a blacksmith out in the middle of the mountains, and he's like, I broke some more swords. I need you to give me 2 more of them. Now the Wado is fine, but the swords, the other 2 he uses keep breaking, and the sword guy is just like, you keep breaking these swords. You got to go easier on them, man. And Zoro's like, well, they just can't keep up with me. And he talks a little bit about what a sword is and everything like that, right? So the only thing I was going to say is maybe not really a plot hole. Like, the implication, I guess, was the swords that were destroyed by Mihawk. The 2 black swords, not black blades, but the ones that had the black, like, hilt and everything like that. Those ones were the same 2 swords that were given to Zoro by Kozaburo, maybe. That was like the idea, because Kozaburo gave him those 2 swords to practice, and he's just like, keep them. I can't make anything but those crappy swords anymore. Oh, back in my day, I made a sword that was the king of hell, and then Zoro remembers that whole exchange with Kozaburo when he's fighting King, and he has Enma, right, okay? So, not really a plot hole, though, because you could say Zoro just broke those swords Kozaburo gave him, because they were pretty shitty. Even Kozaburo himself admitted they were pretty crappy swords, and then he got 2 more, and then those broke, and he got 2 more, and then those broke, and he was kept cycling through the other 2 swords because he couldn't really find anything that was on the level of the Wado, because the Wado is Owazamono, right? It's really hard to find a graded sword of any, caliber, until he ended up in Logtown, which is a popular trading place, and, the Sandai was there, as well as Yubashiri, which was their best sword in the entire shop, which was a Ryu Wazamono, right? A Ryo Wazamono. I always say Ryu, because I want to say it's a dragon, but I think it's Ryo Wazamono, right? Still mad about Yubashiri breaking, right? Okay. So, yeah, dude, we could have the story of Zoro, like, what was his first bounty? Like, Zoro leaves the village, and he doesn't know where to go. Like, I can imagine he doesn't even get off the island that Shimosuke village is on. He just wanders to another village up north, and he's just like, man, I didn't plan this out. Because maybe he wasn't planning on being a bounty hunter at first. Maybe he was just like, time to go out. Because the initial goal is, I'm going to be the greatest swordsman in the world for my sake and Kuina's sake. That's why I have the Wado and everything like that, right? So he probably wasn't leaving with the direct, like to be a pirate or to be a marine or a revolutionary or a bounty hunter. He's just out to fight other strong swordsmen. And the line of work he probably just ended up in was bounty hunter, because that's just like, oh, okay, I collect bounties, cash him in, fight some strong swordsmen. I get some money to, get some food at the end of the day. It's a perpetual motion machine. It works for Zoro, right? So I'd like to see the story of his first bounty he took in. Probably wasn't like super crazy, maybe like 1 or 2 million, which, but once again, by the East Blue standards, I think the average bounty of somebody in the East was like 3 or 4 million. Anybody higher than like 3 million in the East is like, like Alvita, Buggy, Don Krieg, and then Arlong had the highest at 20 million, right? So maybe Zoro fights against somebody like that, and maybe include Wicked Dick and his brother Billy. The material's right there. You have it. We also might get, we're probably not going to include that, but we also might have an alternate version of how Zoro met Johnny and Yosaku. Okay? Now, I'm a big fan of connecting continuities back, so, if the author of this works it in, like, oh no, the way that, Johnny and Yosaku meet Zoro in the anime is the way they meet in the light novel, I would really respect that, because that's like, oh, it all ties back together. You saw that episode. Okay, that's pretty neat. But, Johnny and Yosaku, though, might be a different way of how they ended up there, of how they ended up being, like, Zoro's, like, not his, like, followers or minions or anything like that. It was just, like, fellow bounty hunters that were his just friends that he just palled around with for a little while, right, and went off on jobs together or something like that. We could even have something like that. Like, honestly, it would actually be cool. Like, Zoro takes on maybe somebody that's a little bit higher than he's, like a little stronger than he's normally expected to deal with, right? And he's like, oh, this guy's actually pretty powerful. I don't know if I could deal with him on my own. And then, Johnny and Yosaku show up, and then it's all three of them taking down this one guy together. And then Zoro's like, I could have probably dealt with that guy on my own, but I do appreciate the help. We'll split the bounty. We'll all have dinner tonight. And, it might be something like that. That could be pretty cool there. I was looking at some other, like, One Piece light novels for that reason, and I'm not super familiar with all of them because, like I said, a lot of them don't get serialized in English. It's only recently in the last few years with the Ace light novel, which I think was the first one, and now Heroine's getting an English adaptation. So there were a few others. The Law one I mentioned, but there was one in particular that I didn't even know existed, so I went and read up on it just for this, and it's called Straw Hat Stories, and it came out in 2017, and this light novel is what I have been asking for so long, for at least the anime to do, okay? Like, the manga would be great if Oda himself did this, but the anime could even do this sometimes, okay? And it's different, isolated stories with each of the Straw Hats, okay, having their own little adventures and things like that. Like, that would be really cool. Another thing would be the Straw Hats, like, hanging out on the ship and just talking to each other. But these are, like, isolated stories, okay? And we do see this in the anime from time to time. Like, it's just been a little while. Like, like, at the end of Water 7, we had those, like, isolated, like, Zoro with the Yagaras and those two kids. He was, like, basically being a babysitter. Remember that one? And then, actually, I think the Yagara was a different one. The Yagara, like, resting place. That was a separate filler. And then the Sanji one where he finds the old man, I think his name was Bon Bon or something, and then yes, the salt collects on the roofs of Water 7, and it's the salt from the all blue, it's like, that was a really good one. I want more stuff like that. That's kind of fun every now and then. I also really liked the Brook one at the end of Thriller Bark, where Brook is trying to fit in with the rest of the crew, and he keeps messing up, but at the end of the day, he sings a song or plays the violin, and all the Straw Hats are happy that he's there. That's a good episode as well. Well, anyway, Straw Hat Stories, okay? There is the story of Zoro in this novel, and I like I said, there's no official, so I'm just reading the recap on, like, the wiki, but this sounds hilarious. I want this to be animated so bad, okay? If you're not familiar, it takes place a few days after Dressrosa. So Luffy defeats Doflamingo, Zoro defeats Pika with his Ichi Dai Sansen Sekai, cuts down Pika, Dressrosa is liberated, and there's just celebrations going on, okay? So Zoro is wearing a disguise like he did in Dressrosa. He's wearing a disguise 3 days after the battle. He's in a bar, and he's just drinking, right? And there are these drunk Marines that are in the bar, and they're just like, hey, and they see Zoro, but they don't know he's Zoro, and he's got his 3 swords though, and so they're kind of drunk, so they don't, like, connect the dots right away. So they're like, hey, you got 3 swords. You're like that guy, that Roronoa Zoro guy, the pirate hunter on the Straw Hat crew. And Zoro's, like, drinking, and he's like, oh, I've never heard of him, but I hear he's pretty badass, kind of thing. So there's 3 Marines, and they sit down with Zoro, and they proceed to have a conversation about who the strongest swordsman is in the One Piece world. And reading the recap of this, like, just the synopsis, is like, holy crap, this is like a power scaling argument online. Like, it's eerily similar to that, where they're like, okay, well, obviously it's Mihawk, right? He's the strongest swordsman in the world. I was at Marineford, man. I saw him slice an iceberg in half with one sword. You can't beat that shit. And then another Marine is like, well, I don't know. Look outside. Roronoa Zoro sliced Pika in half, and he was a giant mountain. So you can't just say, you know, oh, Mihawk's the greatest swordsman in the world because he sliced a giant mountain of ice. Well, Zoro sliced through a giant mountain of rock, and that's rock. That's stronger than ice. And it's like, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, what about Shanks? Shanks was at Marineford too, and he was able to scare Akainu. Yeah, but maybe Akainu wasn't scared of Shanks because he was a swordsman. He might have just been scared of Shanks because he's like strong in other ways, right? Like he's a Yonko. So it wasn't about the sword. It was more about like his hockey or something. He's like, oh man, that's a good point. And I'm sitting there reading this like, oh my God, this is like an argument I could see online. This is great. There's a third Marine there that like just can't make up his mind. And he's like, well, what about Ryuma? Ryuma's really strong too. And they're like, yeah, but Ryuma's like, he's dead though. Okay, we're only agreeing to use swordsmen that are currently alive. We're not getting anybody else involved. And yeah, all right, I guess that's okay. And Zoro's there listening to this whole conversation, and he's obviously he can't reveal himself as Zoro, so he's just trying to like you know, oh, I don't know, man. Mihawk might be pretty strong. I think Zoro could hold a candle to him. Nah, man, I'm telling you, Mihawk's stronger, right? And then they bring up Ryuma, and Zoro's like, yeah, well, I guess he wasn't the real Ryuma. He was just a shadow animating a corpse. And the other Marines were like, what? I don't understand. Whatever. Let's not talk about Ryuma. Let's talk about current swordsmen. What about Vista? We got to include Vista in there. Vista fought against Mihawk. They might be comparable. And it's like, yeah, but nobody was there to see that fight. It was like, yeah, that's true. So just like the fight just goes, it goes on and on and on until eventually they just get so drunk. They just start actively like, okay, who's the strongest? And they all agree it's Mihawk. They was like, I guess I'm going with Mihawk because at the end of the day, Zoro uses 3 swords, and I just can't take him seriously, man. He's got green hair. He's got that weird stomach warmer thing. He puts a sword in his mouth. He can't even announce his attack names correctly. And Zoro's there like, damn it! I mean, Zoro can announce his attack names just as good as Mihawk can. Mihawk doesn't even announce attack names. He doesn't even have one named attack, I don't think. Oh my God. And then so all of the other Marines are like, nah, man, I gotta go. I gotta put my vote for Mihawk. Mihawk's the strongest. And the novel ends with Zoro getting up and like slicing a bunch of booze because the Marines agreed to like, oh, we'll pay for your drinks, stranger. And Zoro's like, okay, and he slices all the booze, and so everybody in the bar gets free drinks. And it's like, oh, just go and fill up the drinks. You guys are gonna pay for it, right? You said you were, okay. And then Zoro goes to walk out of the bar, and the other Marines are like, so you're Zoro, aren't you? And he's just like, nah, I'm not. I'm just a muscular merchant traveling through. Just forget you saw anything. And the Marines are like so toasted, they probably are like not even gonna remember this by tomorrow morning, but they're just like, oh, okay. You know, and so that's great. And like, I didn't even know that novel was a thing. I gotta read more about it. There's another story involving like Nami and stuff. So yeah, that's the video. His Zoro light novel coming out with him as a bounty hunter going on various adventures. And I also wanted to talk about that other story and that other Straw Hat Stories light novel because I just never heard about that before. But let me know down below what you expect from this new serialization, what kind of stuff you would like to see focused on there. Maybe we could, you know what, like, this is really reaching here, but maybe you could have some, like, we have some stuff in the 5th movie with Zoro and, who was that guy that, was Zoro's, Saga. Saga was, like, his friend, and we never hear about him again. Like, that would actually be really cool. Like, if I was writing a light novel about Zoro, I would tie it all back to that non-canon movie, OVA, anime-only stuff, and, like, just make it one big shared universe and say that was canon, because there's really no reason why it can't be. Like, you could fit Saga in there. You could fit stuff about Wicked Dick and things. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. This will be Teching and Barry signing out. Go to the end screen.